Right, welcome back to the channel. So we're carrying on with our work involved with fitting the Escort with an ST170 engine. Now, to help us to do that, we're going to need some engine mounts, and we've got here some mounts just bought off eBay. These are for Land Rover engine mounts, so if they're good enough for Land Rover, they'll be good enough for this. And the idea is to make a plate which will fit over this area there, and the mount then will be fitted inside the car, and then we'll make up the difference between the face of that mount and the face of this bush here. So in a standard Escort cross member, which is the one we're going to use, I don't really want to go down the World Cup route because they'll be a bit too stiff for road use. This will fit and bolted up onto there, like so. And of course there's lots of adjustment on that, but we'll aim somewhere for the centre. So the idea is to bolt that in place, same the other side, get plates on the engine block, drop it into where it needs to be, level it all up, and then just fabricate from the face of the plate to the face of that. So I'll make a plate to go on there as well. And that's basically the plan. It's fairly straightforward, not too complicated to do. There's of course a number of ways of doing this. You can chassis mount them, you can use World Cup cross members, or you can even fabricate your own setup, whatever suits you. But I think this is, and has been in the past, the most simplest way of doing it. So of course the first thing we're going to need is a plate to go across those 3 points there. So, and we've got a couple of things we want to avoid here. That's a knock sensor if we're going to use it, depends on what whether we go down the ECU road or not. That's an oil pressure light pickup switch, which I'll be making a pressure gauge pickup from that. So we want to avoid that. So what we need to do is come up here somewhere, across there, so we've got access through to that, and then sort of triangulate off around there. So then when this is in the car engine bay, sort of around here somewhere, it'd just be a case of blocking up to that. The steel we're going to use for that is this 6mm plate, which is you'll probably recognise it. It's the centre cut out from our adapter plate we made for the gearbox. So there should be plenty on there for what we need. And of course, I'm going to use cardboard to template it first. And the other things we're going to be using, which is a little bit of a blast from previous episode, is our centre finders. So if you remember in the previous episode, we cut down some bolts, ground the edges to a point, then heat treated them so we can use them as centre punches. So they'll go into there like so, along with the other ones. And Bob's your uncle, we got a way of centralising points off, so we know where we are. Because I do find centering up for holes a bit of a challenge. So this is my solution to that. So first thing we want is the width of that, which we're looking at. If we go for 130, that should do us nicely. There's a square edge, that looks like a square edge, so we go for that. So 130. And a total height of around 100. Yeah, that's better. Not been whited out, so okay, we'll trim that out now. And we're starting with the easier side first, because the other side's a little bit more involved, because there's a few other things to avoid, including the dipstick hole. So that's our basic plate there. So if we go with a mark out for some holes there, and we're looking at down there-ish. I'll just tap these out now. I'll close out with my ball peen hammer. I keep calling this a ball peen hammer, but a ball peen hammer it is. But so if you hear me calling it a ball peen hammer, it's because I'm an idiot. So now we have our basic shape. We can start going with what we need to be avoiding. So we want to be coming up here, across there somewhere to avoid that. To give us room, maybe even a bit more than that. Across here. And down here somewhere. Will probably do us nicely for that. You could even round that off, I guess. Should be nicer. Well, that'll do us for the pattern, because we can mess around with rounding things off when we come to putting it into steel. So if we make that basic shape now in steel, and we can carry on from there. So this is an excuse to use my plasma cutter, which I always like to have. I'll use if I can. Right, so that's that cut out ready. So let's release that from its grip. Lovely. What a great machine. Obviously I've not got it set up properly, because otherwise there'd be a lot less dross than that. That all taps off very easily, just like so. And then the edges, of course, we can finish off with the flap disc once we're happy with the final bit that we need. Of course we're going to need a disc as well, or something similar, to pick this side up. So get the idea now, that'll be on the engine, and this will be on the car, and then there'll be a plate on there as well that we've got to connect up to. And we'll use, what can we use for that? I've even used exhaust pipe in the past for that. Get a section of exhaust pipe with just the right curve on it, and it works a treat. Or even something like that will do us between. So it doesn't have to be spectacular, but we'll find something to do that with. But first, let's cut out a disc for this. Right, let's see what we got. We can go around for that. Find old grinder discs, quite good for this idea. Find one of the right size now. Oh, I reckon that'll do us nicely. Yeah, we can work with that. It's gone a bit off shape there, but we soon knock that down with a flap disc. Super. Once we've got the other plate made, we'll drop the engine into place and weld up to where we want it to be. So once we know where we want the engine, it's level and it's in the correct place, that's where we make the engine mounts properly. Right then, now that we have our basic plate, we can mark up our first hole. So if we stick our thread rui in it, enough sticking out so I can still touch it afterwards, get it out. Hold that kind of where we want it, which is about there. Give that a smack. Our centre punch for that one. So I drill a hole in that, then we can work our way around to the others. Right, now if you've done this properly, this should go onto here nicely. Should. Oh yeah, that's lovely. We can live with that. Super. Right. So the idea now is simply bolt that up to the engine and then go on to making a plate for the other side. Okay, so that's that bolted on to that side of the engine. We'll just snug those up a little bit using the most incorrect tool ever. And that's our plate done for one side. Now in here, of course, we got a bit more of a challenge on this side. So we want to pick up those 3 holes there. Now, if I remember rightly, I need those 3 holes to make a bracket for an alternator. So we need to make a plate that will fit across there, or even those 4 holes. We can make a plate to fit across those 4 holes there, ready for the alternator in the future. And then coming off that with spacers out and spacers off this to miss that bit that chunks out there. And there's of course, the dipstick goes in there, so we want to avoid covering that up as well. So I'm still struggling to get the holes to line up, so I'm going back to my old ways of doing things. So I over drilled the holes in my plate, bolted through with bolts and nuts backed up onto it, welded those nuts on. Another piece cut out ready to go. So we use this then as a guide for our drills. So we'll stick that in the vise and drill through a little bit each time and bolt it up as we go to keep it tight. Bolting it through each time ensures you're keeping it dead square on each drill run. So using the 10mm bit to centre divot it, 8mm to pilot it, and then 10mm to open it back up again. And this is just what works for me. So theoretically, if all 4 bolt through onto that plate, they should bolt up nicely onto the engine block. Okie dokie, so now you see it fits onto there nicely. So that's the plate ready for the alternator, which will sort of hang off here somewhere. If I remember right, we'll be coming back to that. So the next plate is to work out to come across here. Now we can use our fabricated plate here now to mess about with to work out our gaps. So having bolted this plate onto there now, you can see how this will then double up over that one, and to miss that bit that sticks out there and give us clearance for the dipstick, we need to make a tube to go along there, which we are looking at about 20mm. If you give it 20mm, that'll give us a bit of clearance as well off of there, just slightly, like so. So what we need next as well is to work out to get to our bolt there. So what I think I'll do is just rough up a piece with a hole in it to go between there and there, and tack that all together onto the bolt. Then I can use that plate then to drill out with 3 holes for that bracket there. There we go. So I've got a bit of scrap which I've drilled a hole in and bolted on to there and spaced off, ready to go. Same there, space this off. So this is all in place now. So all I'm going to do is just tack this together, tack that bolt onto there. Then I can use that to pick up my 3 holes for this side of the engine mount plate. So that's that blasted in, and that's with the gasless still. And I'm amazed at how well that gasless works, because that is blasted through there treat. I was going to put it back onto gas welding for this heavier stuff. I thought since it's already set up, I'll just see what happens. And it is blasting it on, so happy with that. Okay, so using this in the same way, I should be able to make my mount plate for this side. So in a snap like that, and there we go. A plate for mounting the engine on the left hand side or the near side. So will it fit? Let's find out. It's a promising start. Those two work, and oh, look at that, happy days. Lovely. Okay, so that fits nicely. So the idea is to make my tubes now to go between there and there, and a tube to space this bit down here. So do the 20mm tubes first, which will space those off. Then we'll measure up to see what we need for that one. And for our spacers, I'm going to use this 10mm inside diameter bar that I used as in the front chassis members, if you remember, to make crush tubes. So this would be perfect for that. So we'll scratch this off at 20mm, and using my ooze cutters I shall lop that off of there. So there's 2 little spacers made there now, so I simply drill these out to get rid of the burr in the middle. So it goes in a vise and do that with the 10mm bit. Right, that's them drilled through and leveled off, ready for welding. And that's all done, just bolted them through and welded them up. Again, this is with the gasless, and I'm very happy with what that looks like, if I'm honest. So we'll take that apart now and start building up ready for the next little tube. So we'll get this back on the engine block, measure up for the next tube. I might need drilling out again just to clearance that. Yes, I'll probably run the drillers through these again, just to, they probably shrunk a little bit with the weld, just to open them back out again. So that's bolted to those 2 fixings there now and spaced off nicely around that. Now with this running square to the block, so 45 there, 45 there, we can measure our gap down here, which is 15.76. So if we lock that in place, and we'll chop off a bit of tube again and do the same thing and weld that onto there. So now we have the plate on this side ready to go to pick up the engine mount. So this side's ready, this side is ready. It's all still looking a bit rough, but I'll clean all these up with a flap disc once the mounts are finished, but you never know, you don't want to go cutting off more. You might need something, so best to leave it there until later on, until it's all in place. So with those in place now, next thing to do is to weld these nuts, back nuts, onto the back of these plates for the engine mounts themselves, because you'll probably not be able to get to these again with a spanner to do these up. And when I'm putting a nut through like that to hold it in place, I like to use a chamfered bolt like this, if I can find one, because that holds it centrally in the hole. Sometimes you'll find if you weld with just an ordinary nut in the back, it is possible to do it with a bolt on the, just a flat bolt in the back. It's very slightly tight to one side or the other, and then you have to run a tap through it to get it to clear nicely. And if you have enough nuts, back up the nuts to the top of the thread so the welding spatter doesn't mess the thread up as well. So hopefully you'll see now that that is super central into there, and that will thread onto there with no issues whatsoever. Right, so that is now ready for us to get the engine in place and level it up and see where we're going with it. Engine and box are now reunited, temporarily at least. And what we'll do now is see if we can squeeze it into the hole and see where we get. Gear stick removed and a little bit of cardboard in there to stop nefarious bits falling into there. And a little trolley in there for the gearbox to land on. So hopefully as it comes in, lands on that, it'll help it slide backwards. Oil spill mopped up, and turns out a yogurt pot fits on the end of there with a bit of heat just to help it stay on. That should keep the worst of the oil in the gearbox. We've got an issue here, but I think I was going to end up having to cut this away anyway for a radiator, so that's a bit bent up, but I'm not worried about that. But we'll go back up a little bit. Right, we're a bit stuck. We're struggling to get over the cross member down there, and the same this side. In hindsight, I should have taken this rocket cover off because that's catching a long way as well, so that's a nuisance. So what I think I might try and do is see if I can find some longer bolts and swap these bolts out one at a time, so I can make a gap between the chassis and the engine cross member. Failing that, we may have to go for plan B, which is take the engine out altogether and the cross member and everything off, mount it to the cross member, then drop the car on top of it. Right, I've just let the engine rest down for a minute and got the valve cover off, so that's going to give us a little bit more clearance on the back there. So I'll get the crane tied up again and see if we can jimmy that into place now. Right, we are definitely stuck. The problem is the gearbox, basically. It needs to come back further, even though we move the gear stick forward. It will appear the gear stick needs to come back out here somewhere, which is a pity. Okay, so that was a bit of a non-starter, but this is the way it goes with messing around with engine swaps, and engines and gearboxes don't belong in the car you're trying to put them into. Now, of course, when I come to doing this eventually for the last time, I'll be a lot more careful and I'll get help. But at the moment, if I bump and scrape and do a bit of dinking like that, it ain't going to matter. So, what I need to do next is trim that out to make space for the engine to fit in and the radiator and what have you, and trim around that gearbox hole there to come back about 3 inches for us to give us a clearance we need. But I think before I do any of that, I'm going to be inclined to get the thing up on axle stands, take the cross member off and mount the engine to the cross member, and then see, pull the car over the top of it and see where we're at then. Righto, that's the front cross member relieved of its positioning. Thankfully I didn't tighten it up particularly tight because I knew it was just mocking up. So what I'll do now is lift the engine back up again and position that underneath and then see what transpires. Not a million miles off there where we need to be, apart from it's on a jaunty angle, which we can sort out. So my plan is find some chocks that will go in between the sump and the block there, about the right size that you want, and then let it rest on that. That way we know it's going to be square with the cross member, which is what we want, left to right, and then clock it from above so that it's square on the cross member too. This is where we're at. Got it squared up onto the cross member now, as far forward as it reasonably can go to leave enough clearance for engine wobbles. This side's looking like it'll light and do something nicely with that. We can get a bit of bar across there, that's no problem. The other side's a bit tighter because the cross flow engine, the mounts are a bit weird on them, on the Pinto engines, so we're a bit tight on this side, so we have to, so we can get access to that lower fixing, bring this up here somewhere and build to it. But not the end of the world. I think we can do something with it. You can see I'm all chopped up in there onto the cross member. So I'm level with the cross member now and square with the cross member. Hopefully you can see sort of lining that up with the anti-roll bar there. We're looking half about there. So a few more measurements to do. I've measured it up to make sure it's bang on centre between the edges there and there. So I know it's bang centre into the cross member. But I think that's where I'm going to have to leave it for now because time's getting on today and it's on hold.